Universe Maker's first scroll. Please view the description for trigger warnings to make sure this is content you're comfortable with. Chapter 5. Hannah's sticky eyelids fought back when she tried to open them. She took a deep breath before trying again and instantly winced. Breathing hurt, her arms hurt, her back hurt. She couldn't really find any place on her body that didn't hurt. The pain brought her eyes open a crack, but the flood of bright light forced them close again instantly. She tried to move, but that proved it wasn't just her eyes that fought against doing what she wanted. With eyes still shut, she moved one arm, felt it wiggle under her stomach, but was pinned by her weight and at the moment useless to help. She tried moving the other arm. It was somewhere behind her back, stretched to the point her shoulder hurt when she tried to move it. Slowly, painfully, she brought her hand around and used it to push away from the ground enough to free her second hand. Luckily, her legs were both awkwardly crumpled to the same side, so other than gritting through the pain, it didn't take much to sit up. Squinting her eyes a crack and blinking repeatedly from the light, she was eventually able to look around. She was outside, in the dirt. Some of it was in her mouth, and the grit felt horrible in her teeth. She leaned over and started to spit, trying to get it out. Just then she noticed a strange creature, small and furry all over, with large eyes that gazed at her. Long, floppy, pointed ears hung to each side of its little head. He stood on his back legs, arms crossed over his chubby belly, his little paws tapping together at its center as he watched her. Hannah spit what she hoped was the last bit of dirt out of her mouth and smiled at the little guy. The creature just kept tapping its paws and staring back. Not knowing what else to do since she got no response from him, she looked around and forgot all about the creature. Her eyes grew wide and she vaguely noticed her jaw dropped open. She definitely wasn't in New York anymore, wasn't even in the United States at the very least. Lush and massive green plants surrounded her. Their leaves alone were large enough to cover her completely from head to toe. As she looked up above her, she noticed a few must have been trees scattered around, towering over the massive plants. She followed the nearest tree up. It seemed to stretch for miles above her to a sky that looked orange. Hannah smiled. This was an amazing dream. As her eyes took in her surroundings, she started to notice that there were no blurry edges to what she saw, something she had gotten used to since needing her extremely thick lenses. Hannah's hand raised to her face. The glasses were gone. She checked her temple, no angry puckered scar. Her eye felt normal and her nose was straight. She could breathe through it again. Hannah laughed at herself. This was a dream. There wouldn't be any wound. Normally, there would still be some sort of disfigurement, but she checked and seemed completely normal. She felt something wet and sticky in her hair. Hannah winced, remembering the sharp pain at the back of her head just before she opened her eyes here. Her hand reached, expecting to feel a large gash, but felt no wound. The thick fluid seemed to trail down her neck to the collar of her shirt that also felt wet. The sticky fluid coated her fingers. When she pulled them back to look at them, she saw the sticky liquid was red. Definitely blood. Her real life was messing with her dreams again. She felt her head again, didn't feel so much as a scratch, but her dream kept the blood. Realizing she would need to figure out what happened to her injuries since her dream was trying to tell her something, she looked down at the little creature. Her therapist, he was probably some kind of a dream guide. Did you fix my head? She asked and pointed at the place she felt the impact. The little creature's paws tapped together faster and he took a step closer. One paw raised in the direction of Hannah's head and he nodded before he stepped back again. Thank you, Hannah smiled. Yep, he was her dream guide. Who are you? She asked. The little creature's eyes seemed human. Hannah could have sworn the creature smiled and his paws tapped faster again. He stepped forward and raised one of his arms. Hannah saw a small charm that dangled from it. She leaned forward, saw writing on one side, and read, Raffi. Hannah loved it. What a wonderful name, Raffi. I'm Hannah. It's nice to meet you, she told him after reading the charm, and reached her hand out, intending to shake his, paw. Raffi jumped back from her extended hand. A startled growl and bared teeth warned her she had scared him. Hannah pulled her hand back quickly. His reaction hit home to Hannah. Her psychologist warned her that her distrust in everyone needed to be addressed. Hannah could handle addressing it in this awesome dream. I'm sorry, she apologized. It's a friendly gesture where I come from. Hannah glanced around again. Which is obviously a long way from here, and I didn't mean to scare you. The growling stopped, but Raffi didn't come any closer. Hannah looked back at the little guy, and they both just stared at each other for several minutes. Hannah looked around again. The stream didn't seem to be progressing by itself, even though it was really interesting. So, what do we do now, Raffi? She asked. Raffi's eyes narrowed to little slits, and he watched her for several minutes after the question was asked. He finally stepped back, turned slightly to the left, and pointed his paw behind him, the whole time looking straight at Hannah. We have to go that way, Hannah clarified as she pointed in the same direction. Raffi nodded and took another step in that direction. He watched as she got to her feet and took a step toward him before he turned completely and headed straight into the thick foliage. Hannah's breath caught and she jumped a little when she saw the leaves lift and retreat out of Raffi's way, and he simply walked right through the opening that was left. Hannah smiled again. This was the best dream ever. She jumped forward to the open space after Raffi walked through. Leaves and branches swung back into place quickly after he passed. Hannah managed to duck a large leaf, felt the sting of a branch snapping back into place on her left shin at the same time, and a second leaf swatted her right in the face. She wrestled through the now violent foliage to get closer to Raffi, hoping she could get close enough that the retracting plants would snap back into place behind her instead of on her. The plan half worked. Her legs were no longer getting hit, but everything from her shoulders up was getting pelted continually. She bent forward at the waist, then bent her legs to get lower to the ground, successfully missing the swinging plant life, but knew her legs wouldn't last long walking in that position. Gauging her options, she finally dropped to her hands and knees and crawled as close behind Raffi as she could. From this vantage point, all she could see was a tunnel of green. The foliage was so thick she couldn't see how far the land stretched, where they were going. She couldn't even see the sky anymore. The weather was warm, but thankfully not hot. Time passed, and she started to sweat a little in the black turtleneck shirt she had picked out for her little break-in. She already started breathing harder. She hadn't crawled this much since she was a baby, and it was much harder than she remembered. Still, on Raffi marched, didn't look back once, and never stopped to rest. Hannah guessed she'd been crawling about an hour when Raffi walked into a small clearing. Relieved to be able to walk again, Hannah pulled her feet under herself and pushed up to stand. She winced slightly as her sore knees resisted the change from crawling to standing, but she didn't have time to baby them. She watched as Raffi didn't slow her weight. He just kept marching into the clearing, did a little hop, and disappeared into the ground. Hannah's breath caught and she rushed forward, worried that her dream had already taken away her little guide. Hannah barely noticed the ground suddenly drop more than 100 feet until it was almost too late. Her feet stopped in time at the very edge, but the momentum of her body had her arms waving wildly for a few moments to keep her from taking a head dive over the cliff. She finally regained her balance after a few moments and was able to look around. It was incredible. The only thing she could compare it to was a prehistoric landscape she had seen from books about dinosaurs. The lush valley stretched for miles. Rich green vegetation carpeted everything, including moss-colored rock peaks that jutted out from the otherwise flat valley. Trees dotted everywhere, stretching impossibly high and looked like palm trees, only the tops were bushy without the usual graceful fronds she knew. Bright-colored birds flew in groups across the orange-red sky. Faint outlines of Hannah counted 3 moons shone faintly in the bright light, one big enough to fill nearly half the sky. The sudden sound of gravel scattering across solid stone below her pulled her attention back on task. She looked down. Raffi was already several feet down the cliff. She watched a moment as he hopped from one tiny ledge to another. This shouldn't be too bad, she thought as she scanned the area below her. She found one small ledge, close enough to give her a good start. She checked beyond that and found a good path that should get her pretty close to the bottom of the cliff. Luckily, the shoes she'd chosen for her nighttime break-in were perfect for her descent. Hannah turned around, crouched down, and lowered her leg to the first ledge she found. Her foot fit on it just as she hoped. She kept her hands on the ground above the cliff and lowered her other foot. She made sure both her feet were secure before she reached down and took hold of the 2 cracks she'd found and tested them. The cracks felt solid, but she pulled against them to make sure. So far so good. She gripped the cracks tightly and crouched down again, lowered her leg to the next ledge and adjusted to different hand grips before moving her second leg to a different ledge. She moved steadily but cautiously down the cliff, making sure her handholds were secure and kept an eye on Raffi at the same time. If he continued to pay so little attention to her, she could lose him, the dream might end, and even though it was a little painful, she was having so much fun. Dr. Miller's office was still and silent. The thick green mist had turned transparent. Dr. Miller was frozen just after hitting Hannah, her face twisted in fury trying to complete the violent swing. Time had been stopped for an hour, but she would never know. In a blink she moved, a loud grunt finished sounding from her mouth as the bat finished its swing. She hit something. She actually hit something in the impossible mist. She quickly looked around and saw the mist had finally thinned enough to see through. A smile raised her lips. The fool had finally stumbled into the portal and passed the find your way through the impossibly thick mist test. Now she had to figure out where the pampered witch was and how to take care of her also. The bat in her hand had a blood smear on it. There was blood spatter across her hands. She hadn't hit something. She'd hit someone. Please let it be Hannah. Please let it be Hannah, she chanted as she looked at her feet to see where the body had fallen. Instead, she saw the round portal just inches away from her toes. One eyebrow raised, whoever it was had fallen through the portal. She smiled. She didn't even have to worry about getting rid of the body. A loud clank followed by a moan sounded from the far corner of her office. Professor McCullen had bumped into her shelves and stubbed a toe or two. Miller's smile brightened. It was Hannah that fell through. Plus, the whole unpleasant incident provided the added benefit of bypassing the first test. Hannah proved to be much less irritating and way more helpful dead than alive. Now to get the fool across the room to jump into the portal. She lowered the bat to the ground and leaned against it. Brad, dear, right here, baby, she called seductively to the science instructor who was now hopping around on one foot. The short, balding man still hopped, knocked into the shelves again, and toppled several things off Miller's bookcase this time. Flustered, he tried to put them all back in a rush that just served to knock them over again, and they all rolled back to the floor. Sweetie, you don't have to worry about that. In you go, remember? She smiled, pointing at the gaping hole at the center of her office. Professor McCullen looked up from his crouched position. Instantly entranced by what he saw, he slowly stood, reached out with his right hand to put whatever it was holding back on the shelf, and let go. The object completely missed the shelf and clanged loudly against the floor, which he ignored this time as he stepped toward the glowing hole. I told you I'd find it, he boasted in awe as a smile spread across his face. When he arrived at the stone border, a strange green and orange world came into view below him. Miller successfully stifled a disgusted groan and waited impatiently for the buffoon to step in. The man didn't move, just stood there staring at the hole in the scene below him with his mouth open. In you go, baby, she reminded him gently, successfully keeping her anger in check. So far. Professor McCullen's head shot up and he pointed at the hole. In there? He shrieked. Miller's left eyebrow pulled up while she watched him. She let go of the bat to make sure she didn't use it on him, since she needed this one alive, and started around the circle toward him. We talked about this, remember? It's perfectly safe, she coaxed, pointing at the whole center to pull his attention away from her and back to the portal. It worked. The guy looked away from her and back down. A few steps closer, and she started again. Just takes a few steps, and you'll be in a land so amazing you couldn't even dream a more beautiful place. She chose her words carefully, keeping him entranced and focused on the hole so he wouldn't notice her movements. Professor McCullen's eyes became wide. He nodded absent-mindedly towards her, his eyes frozen on the portal. She was nearly there, nearly right behind him. Professor McCullen straightened away from the portal slightly but still watched it. But how will I get back? He asked. I don't know. No one's done that yet, Miller admitted and braced herself against the table behind her. Professor McCullen's eyes suddenly focused and he turned toward Miller. Before he could turn around, Dr. Miller pulled both her legs up to her chest and kicked McCullen hard in the side. Professor McCullen was sent flailing into the portal. He let out a shriek of terror that echoed for several seconds through the portal before it came to an abrupt stop. Miller heard a hollow thud at the same moment. "You okay, baby?" Miller called. Moans, lots of moans, were her only response for several minutes, followed by a very, very angry, "You witch!" "I'm sorry, baby. I don't know what happened," she lied innocently. "You kicked me. That's what happened," he countered even louder than before. "It was the table. I didn't see it and ended up stumbling into you," she countered. "How did you stumble into me with the bottoms of both your feet?" he yelled back. "It wasn't my feet. It was my back," she lied again. "Really? Because the two shoe prints on my shirt is telling me it was your feet, baby." "Well, either way, there's no way for you to get back without finishing the course now," she advised. There was another long silence. "You witch!" he repeated in the loudest, highest pitch, and most desperate screech so far. "Focus, Brad," she ordered. "Do you see a large rock? It should be close by you," she instructed. "Yes, I see it, you bit," he started to answer. "Enough, Brad. Stop worrying about what's past and concentrate on what's next. We don't have much time," she cautioned. "Yes, I see it," he confirmed, quieter this time, but still angry. "Okay, from where you landed, walk straight to the rock and lean your back against it." Miller heard his footsteps. Then they stopped. "Okay, my back's against it," he sassed like a schoolboy. Miller knelt down beside the stone border around the markings. "Scan the horizon with your eyes. You should see the next portal. It looks like a black spot in the sky straight ahead of you." Another silence as Miller waited. "That's at least 10 miles from here." He was shrinking again. "I know, baby, but you can do it," she encouraged out loud, but in her mind she was already working on her next move after this failed attempt was over. "Do you see a small furry animal at your feet?" she further instructed. "No," came back his quick response. This time Miller paused. Where was the little wretch? "Look around. Sometimes he likes to hide." She heard the rustling of leaves, more footsteps, and more rustling. "No creature, small, furry, or otherwise," he confirmed. Then she remembered Hannah. "You don't happen to see anyone else down there, do you?" she asked, hoping the answer came back yes, dead, crumpled on the ground. "No. Did you send someone else down here?" he asked, a little hope in his voice. She ignored the question. "Do you see anything else?" Brad squealed, this time happily. "Oh, you're right. I see footprints. They're going in the direction of the portal. I'm not alone," he called happily. Miller cursed. How had she survived? And now she was ahead of them trying to get the artifact. She knew to be suspicious of that girl the moment she asked for help on languages. What 18-year-old who could pay anybody to do anything for her would want to put the work it took into learning another language? Now Miller understood the truth. She was actually after the scroll all along, or the artifact. Either way, she just turned from trouble to a threat. A crooked smile raised the sides of her lips. The pampered girl had no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. Her end would be far worse than anything that little baseball bat could have done. She only wished she could see her suffer, but she could only see the areas around the portals. "Follow them, quickly. Remember, you don't have much time or you'll be stuck in this dimension with no way out," she warned. It was a lie, but she needed him to move. "Okay," he called, and Miller heard quick steps retreating. Then she remembered. "One more thing, baby," she called right before she tossed a heavy bag down to him that clanked loudly when it landed. "That bag. Open it," she instructed. "There's a plastic chart that has sketches of different animals you might see as you go. Next to the sketch is a picture of a weapon in the bag that works best on that animal. If you use the gun, make sure the silencer is on, otherwise you'll have every animal on you in a matter of seconds. If you come across something that isn't pictured, try to remember it and how you killed it so I can update the card." She heard the zipper give way on the bag and slight clanging of weapons as he pulled the chart out. "What kind of animals are these?" he cried. Nothing to worry about. They're easier to kill than they look. You'll be fine," she encouraged. "I won't be able to talk to you again until you make it to the next portal," she warned. "Okay," he agreed uneasily. Remember, baby, you need to hurry, she warned. The footsteps quickly retreated again. Miller stayed in her position on the floor as she looked around her office. Chills ran up her spine again. The sooner she was able to leave the school, the better. She'd been forced to give too much information of her actual history to secure the job and get access to this office. It was only a matter of time before someone recognized her and reported her to her old employer. Why had this been the next portal location? She knew this would be a rush job the moment she found the location, and Dr. Miller hated to rush. Usually she had time to prepare the runner, condition them with hypnosis and substances. The final spell in the scroll put them in her complete control for the run, but the process took weeks. This was sloppy. It was also her only option. It was better to sacrifice this attempt and move quickly to hopefully a safer location than risk staying in the school a moment longer than necessary. Dr. Miller pushed away from the floor, carefully rounded the markings, and sat at her desk with the scroll laid out in front of her. She took out her notebook and started to translate the next stanza. At least this time she wasn't going to be surprised when the green mist rushed back in the hole and she was left empty-handed.